Welcome to lesson 1 of module 8. In this video, we're going to be looking at homeostasis. When we talk about homeostasis, we really want to make sure we very clearly understand what negative feedback loops are, and then we're going to look at some specific examples about temperature and glucose. So homeostasis is the maintenance of variables in a biological system within certain limits. And so we can see here that for each different condition in the body, there are going to be different limits that the body's going to try and keep them inside of. And we can see here on the left that we see homeostasis like a balance beam. When it's all balanced, we're happy, but as soon as we have an imbalance, which we're going to call the stimulus in our video today, we are going to need to get our control center to help us respond to that change and correct that imbalance. So when we talk about negative feedback loops, it's caused by feedback in a system that we want to reverse and therefore change it back to our homeostatic level. We want to maintain stability through the action of the nervous system or hormones, both acting together. And the hypothalamus in the brain is the part of the brain that compares information from our sensory receptors, and this has a set point or optimum value, which is how we know that the stimulus is outside that balance region. So we see that usually the system is in a stable state. However, when there's a change, this stimulus occurs and it is detected by the receptor. The receptor then sends a signal to a control center. That control center then sends a signal to an effector, which may be a cell, a tissue, or an organ. And then we see a response to the signal to restore the body back to its original state. And we can see this here in our 5 steps. So when we talk about our first example, we are going to talk about temperature, and it's our body's way of regulating our temperature, which is called thermoregulation. If the body's temperature rises anywhere above or below the 37 degrees, the thermoreceptors in the hypothalamus will detect this change and therefore initiate a response. So if we see here on our diagram, if our body temperature increases, we again see blood warmer passing through the hypothalamus. And then we see some body responses here. So we see our skin, blood vessels dilate, we see our sweat glands being activated, and therefore trying to decrease the body's temperature. When we decrease the body's temperature, we go back to our normal temperature. On the other hand, if our body temperature goes below that 37 degrees, we see cooler blood passing through the hypothalamus, and therefore our skin blood vessels need to constrict. Our skeletal muscles get activated, and therefore we start to shiver, and then we start to see our body temperature increase back to our homeostatic point of 37 degrees. So here we have a bit more of an explanation of each of the responses, the way the body responds to that either increase or decrease in temperature. And we see things like when we're cold, we see blood moving away from the surface. We see goosebumps, which perform an insulating effect. We seek shelter, we decrease our surface area, we have shivering, our involuntary movements of our muscles, and some organisms increase their metabolism. If we have our body temperature increasing, we usually see sweating. We have vasodilation, where we start to see flushed skin, allowing some heat to be lost by radiation and convection. And then we have our evaporative cooling from water, swimming, or bathing. And our second and last example is glucose. So blood glucose sugar levels increase and decrease based on the food being eaten and physical activity. If we eat more carbohydrates, we then need to make more insulin. Less carbohydrates, we're going to have more glucagon. Glycogen is what we call our stored glucose. Also, another word we might hear in this instance is hyperglycemia, which is where our blood glucose level is too high, or hypoglycemia, where our blood glucose level is too low. Our optimum range is between 3.5 and 8 millimoles per litre. So if we see our blood glucose levels rising, the pancreas will start to produce insulin. This stimulates glucose uptake by the cells, and it stimulates glycogen formation, which is stored and in the liver, and therefore we see glycogen go back into the blood, being released from our liver, and our blood glucose falls to the normal range. However, if we see a declining blood glucose level, we see the pancreas start to produce glucagon, and that stimulates the breakdown of glycogen in the liver, which then is the glucose is released from the liver to allow the blood glucose level to rise to its normal range. That concludes our video about homeostasis and thermoregulation and our blood glucose levels. Make sure you tune in for video 2.